Hi, and welcome to episode 269 of the Untethered podcast. Today, we have Becky Birkenfeld joining us. Becky is a speech language pathologist and feeding therapist in Bergen County, New Jersey. She owns a home-based private practice treating children in the comfort of their own homes and providing parents with hands-on support throughout the process. Becky specializes in early language acquisition, treating children on the autism spectrum, and extreme picky eating. Quick disclaimer, all information, content, and material of this podcast are the opinions of the speakers and is for the informational purpose only and not intended to serve as a substitute for the consultation, diagnosis, and/or medical treatment of a qualified healthcare provider. Welcome to the Untethered podcast. I am your host, Hallie Vulcan. I'm a certified myofunctional therapist, feeding specialist, podcaster, business owner, and mentor. This podcast is all about getting your questions answered and collaborating with colleagues to bring you the most up-to-date information in the orofacial myofunctional therapy, airway, tethered oral tissue, and pediatric feeding therapy space. If you're new here, I challenge you to keep an open mind and join my mission to spread this message far and wide. If you've been around since June 2019, thanks for being a loyal listener. As we jump into today's episode, remember to listen with correct oral rest posture. Tongue up, lips closed, teeth apart, breathe through your nose. Let's get started. Hello, Becky. Welcome to the podcast.
Hello. Thank you so much for having me, Hallie.
I'm excited to have you on here because I know you and I are like friends, like, online and outside of recording. And so it's always fun when it comes full circle and I get to have somebody as a guest on the pod.
Yeah, for sure.
I know we're going to talk about one of your little ones. You're going to share her whole journey and your whole journey with her today. But before we jump into that, I want you to share your background so everybody understands like who you are. So I'm going to turn it over to you and let you tell us a little bit about you and your professional background.
So I am a speech language pathologist. I am a feeding therapist. I specialize in kind of like the early intervention world. I started out my career working at an early intervention center where I got my base. I worked with a lot of children on the autism spectrum, and so I'm pretty well versed in that world. And I love, my favorite thing is getting a little one who doesn't talk and getting them to start talking. To me, there's no better feeling than giving the parents that gift of being able to communicate with their children. Through that also, I started working in feeding a little bit, and it kind of became my niche. I love to share this. And one of my little guys now eats lobster mac and cheese. Like that's one of his favorite foods now. So it's really fun when you get a child who eats just the regular old kind of beige diet and they go to any, I love giving parents the freedom of, we can go anywhere now. We can have a family trip, we can go on vacation now, we can spend the day out and we don't have to worry, what is my kid going to eat? I have to pack all of their food, otherwise they're going to starve. So just making parents' lives easier in those respects for me is so rewarding and so important.
I love that. I feel like that mirrors where I started in my journey, where it was like all I wanted to do was help children communicate and get their basic like wants and needs like communicated and get those needs met. And that shifted to me working with autistic children, which shifted to me going, why are these children always constipated? Why are they all eating beige diets?
Yes.
Like I'm so fascinated by this. And then I fell into the feeding world and the rest is history. And so I'm like, I feel like we're like, parallel journeys here.
So even more so, when I was listening to your story about which one's your older one? Mia?
Lily.
Lily. So, I mean, the same thing happened with my older one, with Gabby, when she was, I think, like her first week of life. I said, why is nursing harder than giving birth? It's not normal. And so that's how I fell down the rabbit hole. I'm like, they didn't teach us this in grad school. And so I would stay up till like 2-3 o'clock in the morning, learning about ties, tongue ties, tethered oral tissues, all of it. I became really good friends with Dr. Siegel. He had this really amazing symposium back then when I first fell into all of it. And I fell in love with that area. I was like, why aren't people talking about this? Why is this not widely known? Why is it that I am an SLP who learned about it in grad school, but not? and from there, I think it just kind of catapulted. And I think during COVID, one of the best things that came out of COVID for me was connecting with so many professionals, and through you finding all these airway accounts, and learning more about that. And that's what this is going to be about today, because this is just a whole nother rabbit hole that I think needs to be well known. We'll get more into that.
Yes, for sure. No, it's, I tell everyone, I'm like, I went to look for that podcast more so for my own knowledge as a therapist who, yeah, was in this space, but also I just wanted to listen to something on the go, like myo
Yeah,
tots, airway, like give me all the good stuff. Right.
yeah,
And it didn't exist in like summer of 2019 or spring of 2019. So I was like, oh, there we go. Clearly I'm going to have to create that. And with the goal to bring the information forward to everybody, because I was
yeah.
like, it should not be this hard to
No,
find information on two of our basic needs in life, eating and breathing. Like,
yeah.
where's all the info?
I mean, like, how many times have I DM'd you, Hallie? Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. For, like, I mean, the fact that you put all of this out there, um, you don't gatekeep. You really educate the public. I mean, you educate other professionals. I think it is there. It's really invaluable. And I wouldn't be where I am now if it weren't for you, and pushing through all of that, and trying. What you always say, just because it's common doesn't mean it's normal, is like what is just on loop in my brain all the time. And so let's jump in a little bit, because so how it all started was, my little one, her name is Vivi. She's 5.5 now, and last January, so a little over a year ago, I was getting really concerned. Every other word, she's like, "What? What, mommy? What, mommy? I can't hear you, mommy." And I was like, I don't, she can't hear us. She can't hear us. She passed her hearing screening at birth, so I knew there wasn't anything, and during COVID, she had no issues. I know she could hear us. She started school that September. Yeah, I think it was that September that she started preschool, and she had gotten like a handful of ear infections. And I was like, okay, we have to go see the ENT. We need to see what's going on. I mean, I wasn't even in the chair for 60 seconds, and the doctor had told me that she had to get her adenoids out.
Mm.
It hadn't even been 60 seconds.
Which is like pretty serious because they're pretty
Hmm.
conservative about those sometimes on kids.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's like, they need to come out. And that was even before he like went over the hearing test. And I panicked. I'm like, and my husband would yell at me. He's like, as a therapist, like you would yell at the parents to, go and get this taken care of ASAP. And I'm like, I know, but I know there's more to the story. I know there's more. And, it pains me to say that it's taken this long to get to this point, but it was like I was exhausting all of my resources. I would try something, and it was, I would wait for a dead end, basically. I was just waiting and waiting. So from there, we saw a craniosacral therapist who is phenomenal. And all these other people, they helped in other capacities, but it wasn't getting to the root issue. So, we saw the craniosacral. We worked with a homeopath. I saw an airway dentist initially, but at the time, they were like, well, she could maybe use a little bit of expansion, but it wasn't like a clear yes or no. And it was like, things weren't getting better. Her hearing wasn't improving. And this was over the course of maybe like a couple of months. But finally, I'm like, you know what? If nothing else, we have to get tubes in. So we did the tubes. Thank God she started hearing okay, and um, it was just everywhere I turned it wasn't giving me the answer. And I was losing it a little bit. Until finally, this year we met with an airway dentist, Dr. Barry Raphael, and I'm so grateful that he is so close to me in proximity. I would travel so far for this man, but he's probably like 20 minutes from my house, and he is just so much on the same page as me and you and everything that we've been learning about and preaching kind of, and it feels validating that, we're working in the right direction now.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
just I mean, I took her to a salt cave. I had her get a lymphatic drainage massage.
You're doing all
um,
the things. This child is
I'm
getting, it's like,
I'm
you think
doing
about it, you're like, can I do this for myself too while we're at it? Like, please.
well. To be fair, I actually started doing all those. I had a hard time nasal breathing,
Hmm.
and I started doing all of these things, and I'm like, literally, I realized about a month ago that I started breathing through my nose so much better, and so that's when I was like, oh, let me take her to the salt cave. Let me get her a lymphatic drainage massage. Um, next on my list is gluten. Am I cutting gluten out for her? And before I do that, and that's more of like, I feel like that's going to be a hard one because it's like, what am I going to feed her?
Hi,
School.
that was me last summer. We cut gluten out at the end of summer. I let her go all the way through summer. And then
Yeah,
finally, like, I was like, okay, we're starting a school year where I'm going to make her lunches, which I usually make her lunches anyways. But it
yeah,
was like, we're just going to hit reset. Like, she's not at
yeah,
a day camp where they're giving her lunch or something. So, like, it's
yeah.
easier to control at this point because my kids, like, love getting the lunches at the camp that they go to. And it's so nice to have a summer off. But now I'm like, no more of that. Um, as we roll back into summer. But I will tell you, like, not only did she have a growth spurt, so there's definitely that, but
Yeah.
just within like a week or so, the inflammation in her body just went completely gone. Like, she would have a little
Mhm.
tiny gut at the end of the day or after she
Yeah,
ate. Like, she doesn't really get that anymore unless, like, I know she's had she's had a little gluten by accident, and you can see, or she's sick. Like,
yeah,
sometimes she gets sick and then there's some inflammation because of that. But overall, she is like this skinny little thing now, whereas before she was like puffy. Is probably the best
yeah.
way I could describe it. She was like puffy, and like her tummy would be like kind of a little, like she'd be like have like a little belly at the end of
Like
summer.
distended, right?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah,
yeah. So, I've noticed that a little bit too. And so when we saw Dr. Barry, he had a great recommendation. He's like, before we do anything, I want you to go see a functional medicine doctor and rule out any sort of like infections, parasites, mold, anything that could be in her body that could be, causing the inflammation. So, of course, we went, and lo and behold, she has an infection.
ah,
hmm the way that the doctor explained it to me was, we don't know how long she's had it for, but she hasn't had any outward symptoms. So I'm thinking it's been there for a while now.
yeah.
We don't know how long. So that was kind of like, there's an answer. We have a
Yeah.
little bit of an answer. It's just, why doesn't anyone tell us these things?
It's a lot. And I feel like the more that I read, the more that I like learn and understand. I feel like going to a functional medicine doctor was like the doctor 100 years ago. Do you know what I mean? Like, they
Yeah.
were more integrative. They used homeopathic medicines as like a
Mhm.
first resort instead of like a weird crunchy side thing.
Yeah,
And so I
yeah.
just feel like things have evolved so much. There's so many toxins in our environment that
Mhm.
I feel like it's hard to get away from them. And so if like what I'm learning from, because I just had Katie Green on the podcast. I don't know if you follow her.
I just
Yeah.
listened to the podcast.
Okay. So I love her. I followed her forever. Like, it took us forever to coordinate our schedules and get her on the podcast. But
Yeah.
like, she's such a good balance for me between like healthy, holistic, and like real life.
hmm
Because I feel like there's so many accounts out there where it's like, you got to do these 57 things. And if you do one
Yeah.
wrong, you're screwed and you might as well not do any of it. And I'm like, well, that's not realistic. And
And
if you
then
like,
you become anxious, and then you cancel. Oh my God, it's a whole cycle. I
right.
know.
Whereas she's kind of like, okay, if you do like at least some of these things, like your body
Yeah.
should be able to live and
Yeah.
manage these toxins that we're exposed to on a regular basis. And so it was
Mhm.
such a mindset shift where I was like, okay, we're exposed to toxins. We know
Yeah.
that. Like, no one has to be okay with it, but like, okay, how do we get our body to some like homeostasis where no matter what toxins are thrown our way, we can
Yeah.
manage it, like kind of get back to, our homeostasis and continue forward, right? And so that's where like these functional medicine doctors I think can be so helpful, and that I've turned to like osteopathic medicine and
Yeah.
homeopathy and Chinese
Yeah.
medicine, and I mean, I believe in Eastern and Western. Like, I use all
Yeah.
the things, but I've just seen, especially like with me, I feel like Mia is like a version of me. And I feel like
Mhm,
as an
mhm.
adult, I need to go back to the functional medicine doctor,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
I need to like figure out what's going on too to get back to like my own homeostasis. So,
I mean, look,
oh,
at the end of the day, if we try all of this and we go through the expansion process, and at the end of the day, her tonsils and her adenoids are still enlarged, I'm obviously going to take them out, right? Like, I'm going to go through with it. It's not like I'm totally opposed to it, and it's not like I'm saying that's the wrong answer. Um, but to me, it's like what I always tell my husband: we can take them out, we can't put them back in.
yeah.
So I'd rather,
It's also part of your immune system.
yeah.
So there's
I'm
that.
right. Like if they say, what is it? Like they're the gatekeepers of your body.
Yeah. And
Um,
they will grow back too if you don't always address the root cause. So, like there's so
yeah.
many kids where they're removed, but somehow 3
Hmm.
years later the adenoids are back like and worse than before, and the
Yeah.
tonsils grow back. And and I think part of it is, especially with kids, at least I've learned from some surgeons, is like they don't always take out all the tissue because of like
Hmm.
bleeding risk, or because of, it is part of your immune system, or that's more invasive than just leaving a little tissue. Well, if you leave a
Yeah.
little bit of the tissue, you have a higher risk of it growing back. And the chances of that
Mhm.
happening, not that we don't want it to be there at all, but like if your immune system is compromised
Yeah.
and airway's an issue and you have this inflammation going on, like hi, they're gonna pop back up.
Well, so that's what I love so much about Dr. Barry is that, it's not just about the expansion. Like he has us working with a breathing coach. He has us, you know, we're using the myo brace for a short time just to see how she responds to it. We haven't done sleeping with it yet. Just because, I'm nervous. But I have to say, so after we found out about the infection, she's been on this like herbal supplement the past week. Her snoring has reduced this week.
So the inflammation's probably going down
So
too.
it's going down. So
Yeah.
it's like I feel like the pieces are starting to fall into place a little bit.
Amazing.
It's
Ah,
it's exhausting.
it
But
is.
so you brought up Katie Green, and I was listening to that podcast this morning actually. And one thing that I took away a lot of things, but one thing that really stuck out for me was, who do we listen to and who do we trust?
Right. Right.
So, you have to listen to yourself. That's, I think, I tell moms a lot of, when I work with my students, and I tell the moms, you have to trust your gut. You have to trust your instinct. And sometimes it's hard to apply it to yourself. But, I mean, thankfully, Alex, my husband, he's very supportive and he's on board with whatever crazy idea I come up with next. He's like, yeah, whatever you think.
That's what my husband does too. He's like, you're going to do it anyway. So, I mean, what is it? He's like, all right. He's like, what is this going to cost me? And I'm like, I'll pay for that. It's like, I got this. Don't worry. It's all good. I mean, not that it matters, but at the same time, that's one of the other things too, is I feel like having the resources, because a lot of these things are not covered by insurance. Right. And so it's not even just
Mhm,
having the
mhm.
knowledge, but having
Yeah,
one, the providers in your area, two, even having the
yeah,
money to do it, or figuring out how to access resources to help you.
yeah.
It's not mainstream, and that's what kind of breaks my heart a little bit, because I'm like, I
Well,
know I can give this to my kids, but I know this
yeah.
is not something I can recommend for every single patient. That I can recommend it, but not everybody's going to follow it.
Right. So, okay. So maybe let's talk about that a little bit because, I think that's a big roadblock is that a lot of this is out of pocket.
Yeah.
We might get reimbursement for X or Y, but what can most people do to kind of mitigate the costs and, work around it? Because, insurance does not cover a lot of this kind of stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think, one of the things that you've talked about that's so beautiful is like the behavioral side of things. Like, what can we do before we go right into for a surgery, right? Because I think for some people, if surgery is covered, that might be their go-to, because it just seems like path of least resistance monetarily,
Yeah.
path of least resistance to maybe fix their kid, and look, if
Right.
somebody's choosing to do that, I'm passing zero judgment. Like, you do you,
Yeah.
I don't
Yeah.
think there's anything wrong with that. um, but when we have these conversations and we share information and we give these other, avenues, right? And then you have parents coming to you going like, who do you know that does that takes insurance? And I'm like, well, I don't know. It's okay. I'm like, I don't know many insurances that cover a lot of airway
Yeah.
dentistry, or like,
Mhm.
I know Barry is an orthodontist, so maybe you can use some of, like, if you have a dental plan, or I think orthodontist, I
But
think
it's
maybe
like you get like a one lifetime usage of
right.
it. So
Exactly. Right. So it's like
Alex is
exactly.
like, let's hope she doesn't need braces down the
Right.
line.
I know. Oh my God. We'll have to change her name and social security number. I'm just kidding. Joking.
But like,
um,
yeah, but like you said also, well, no, I'll go back to that later, but continue,
No, I
continue.
was going to say, like, I called a functional medicine doctor here in Boca, and I should have put us on the wait list because we probably would be going like now.
Yeah.
But I was like, oh, I don't know when they're going to come available. And Lily's going to sleepaway camp. So I'm not going to like start something in the summer with her. It was like a 3-month wait list. And I don't remember what the consult fee was, but I think I was looking at a couple $1,000s for the three of us to just go for a consult. And I was
Mhm.
like, okay, I need to be, it wasn't that I can't pay for it, but I was like, I'm not going to invest the money until like I'm really serious and ready to like, and I don't know I'm going to be in 3 months, right? So now I'm like, oh, I probably should have done that, but here we are. So one of the things that I do like recommend to families is see what you can do. Like, can you get a sleep study? Because sometimes if you have a sleep study, if your child has like obstructive sleep apnea, for example, it may
Mhm.
be worth getting the sleep study, because then you can argue with insurance to cover like an oral appliance. They are now
Oh,
covering certain appliances for sleep apnea in adults. And I believe it's
okay.
trickling down to kids. Now, like the Vivos DNA, for example, is a covered, I had it a long time ago before it was covered. So no benefit to me. But I believe that's a covered appliance. They have like a certain like mRNA appliance or something that's covered. And so I feel like once insurance starts to accept certain appliance types,
Hmm.
then that can arguably expand to other companies' appliances, oral appliances that maybe serve the same need, right? It's opening an
Yeah.
airway. Um, and so I think we're moving in a direction where we could potentially be getting more things covered, but you have to have a diagnosis, right? And so if
Right.
you have a kid with like sleep disordered breathing, or like a more mild airway issue, which we still know is a huge problem and not mild, but we'll
Yeah.
just go with that term for now. I do think it's still going to be pretty hard. There was a mom a long time ago who was on the podcast who was on Medicaid, and she
Hmm.
did get Medicaid to cover her child's craniosacral therapy, his oral
Wow.
appliance, she got like them to cover everything. And I think she was going to Lenny Kundell in Connecticut.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
So I think the child may have had an ALF appliance and tongue tie release and craniosacral, like all the therapies.
Wow.
But it is a full time job. It is a
Right.
full time job arguing with insurance, right? So at the end of the day, can you get things covered? Sure, but you have to know, one, how, and two, you got to have all the time in the day to go back and forth.
That's a hot tip, though.
I mean, hey, so I feel like, is it possible? Yes. Are you
It'll
going to
wear
get
you down, but it'll save you some
you'll be
money.
exhausted at the end of it and you'll need like a massage, but no.
I've
Um,
I've spent countless hours on the phone with insurance, for my clients, and I'm just there. It is exhausting.
it is.
And then they transfer you like 15 times, and you're
Yep.
like, oh, I just explained my whole story.
Yeah, I mean, we're out of network,
But
right? Like we don't take
yeah,
any insurance,
yeah,
but even so, we still have to write letters of medical necessity. We still have
mhm,
paperwork sometimes that comes our way that families will partially fill out. We have to complete, and then we fax it in for them because it
yeah,
has to come from the provider. We
right,
don't have access to the provider line or a provider portal because we're out of network, but they treat us as if we should, the insurance
right,
companies.
right.
So the whole thing is just, it's such a racket. And this is really, for those listening, this is the United States. Like, it's different outside of the United States.
Yeah.
But in the US, it's just, they make it very hard. The squeaky wheel sometimes, though, does win. So be a squeaky wheel, if nothing else.
No, that's good to know, because I mean, it's a lot. It's a
Yeah.
lot. And, all
Well,
these
and
follow-up
myo, right?
appointments.
Like
Yeah.
myotherapy, feeding therapy, that stuff should be covered.
Yeah.
So if you're going to an SLP or an OT, if you're going to
Hmm.
a non SLP or non OT, like someone who does not have feeding therapy and can't bill the
Hmm.
codes, the diagnostic codes and the CPT, the procedural codes,
Right.
then don't count on it. Like there are people
Yeah.
giving super bills out there who are not licensed to do the work that are on the super bills. So if someone gives you a super bill and they're not a speech language pathologist or an occupational therapist or a physical therapist,
Yeah.
they cannot bill the same codes that we can.
Right.
And so I think that's another tip is like, I'm not saying don't see other people, but if you want insurance reimbursement, make sure you're
Yeah.
going to somebody that has the SLP, OT, or PT credentials so
Right.
that your
Right.
super bill can be argued. Otherwise,
Yeah.
you have nothing to base it on and nothing to go back on.
No, I think that's very important. I think that's really good to know because I've had a lot of people kind of ask me about this, and when I say the downside is it is out of pocket. It's a big commitment. It's a time commitment. It's I mean every day I'm administering like medications and breathing exercise, and it's a full time job.
It's a lot.
I feel like I've been underwater a little bit, the past couple of months, just trying to sort this all out. But a lot of people are like, oh, I'm not paying. It's out of pocket. I'm not doing it. So
Well, you know
then,
what's also really interesting? I've had some families who get better reimbursement out of pocket than they get going in network. I
interesting.
can't tell you why. I don't know enough
Huh.
about and these are people with like BCBS, United Healthcare, Aetna. What's another big one? I'm like, there's a couple. Like, anyways,
Yeah.
I'm like, there's another one that's like on the tip of my tongue that's not coming to me, but I've
Cigna.
Cigna. Yep. I've had family and some of these insurances make it really, really hard. And like in our, even like our EMR that we use, right? We'll write like 50-minute or 30-minute or 25-minute or whatever, however long like that code is being billed for, which we don't have timed codes, right?
Mhm.
But we do it on our back end. So we know how to bill the right fee for the
Mhm.
patient. But then it shows up like 50-minute speech language session or 50-minute feeding session or whatever shows up on the bill, right?
Yeah.
We've had these, and this is still happening. It just happened last week. These insurances come back and they're like, what is this dash 50 modifier? We're like, it's not even in the same column, you morons. Like, and we have to manually change our super bills so that that 50 doesn't show up because their system is so dumb or the person processing it doesn't get it.
Yeah.
That number it's in a separate column. It's attached to some words.
Yeah.
This is not written like a normal modifier here. Hello, like look at the super bill. But there's always something. There's always something. And again, the squeaky wheel, the person who is persistent enough, like we help a lot of I will say like probably 95% of our patients that want to submit and get reimbursed.
Yeah.
And we
Yeah.
guide them on how to do it. And we basically, if they come back and say it's not, it's not approved, we go challenge it. Call
Yeah.
and find out how many different ways can we challenge it? Because if you go right to an appeal, you're
Mhm.
done. You're done if you lose the appeal.
Mhm.
But if you challenge it in a different way first and that
Yeah.
doesn't work, then you still have the opportunity to appeal, right? So how
Okay.
many different like steps, like go the route that gives you the most opportunities to essentially appeal, but don't go right into the appeal, right? So we've
Yeah.
learned a lot of information that being out of network on how to kind of play the insurance game, but our
Mhm.
families do typically get reimbursement, obviously at varying degrees based on their plan.
Right.
But it's like something I'm very passionate about because I'm like, you pay a ton of money to
Yeah.
insurance. Like
Yeah.
the kid needs this. We're not doing this for fun, right? Like
Right.
we're doing this
Right.
because the kid needs it, right? Meanwhile, Lily says to me yesterday, she actually was like singing some song that she heard at Hebrew school and like just came home like randomly singing songs. She's never sang songs from Hebrew school, like prayers and stuff yesterday. And I was like, this is so fascinating. She's like, oh, this is my favorite one. And she starts going like, la, 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 la. And I was like, her tongue is moving with her jaw. It's not dissociating. And I look at her, I'm like, Lily, try this. I'm like, la, la, la. I'm like showing her, like, move that tongue separate. And so she starts doing it. I'm like, oh, good. And then she goes, yeah, mama, my tongue is coming between my teeth for S. And I was like, oh, it's just like, I thought we fixed that.
No.
But the fact that like at almost 8 years old, she is 8 years old, almost 9 years old in August, right? She like
Yeah.
recognized that and said that to me. I was like, oh, now we have to address it. Thank you, Lily.
Oh man.
As I'm writing myself a note here, I'm like, S, L, circle, Lily, get her on a therapy with one of my team members.
I mean, I
Goodness.
feel like it's also such a fine line. I've always been like, I don't want to like over therapize my own kids. Like, I don't want to
Right.
look at them with my therapy eyes. But
It's hard.
and oh, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Even
So,
like with the tongue tie release, like so back, when Vivi was born, at the time, I feel like standard practice was like getting craniosacral and like all that afterwards.
mm,
So we didn't do body work before, and I called Dr. Siegel, like literally I was in the hospital. I'm like, oh yeah, I'm pretty sure this kid has a tongue tie. Even before when I was pregnant with her, she had like hiccups in my belly all the time. Like this kid, I
Yep.
know she has a
Yep.
tongue tie. I mean, she came out and I called Dr. Siegel. I'm like, we need to come see you. And so, like I went to go see him almost like she was maybe a week old.
Mia was 5
Um,
days and we did not do pre-op anything. So I feel you. And that was my second kid.
yeah,
Like it's like
I
I
mean,
knew
like it
better,
keeps
but
me up at night. It keeps me up at night. We saw, I don't know if you know Lee Muro by us here.
I know the
Sh-
name, but I don't know her. Yeah.
She is like the best human on planet Earth. I mean, I love her so much, and she did so much. We've all been to her, my whole family. My parents have got. She's amazing.
Well, I feel like I need to talk to her now. You'll have to send me her name later.
Oh, you will love her. Yes, I.
Yeah.
All of my people have to come into your your podcast.
Yes, send them all. I mean, Scott's been. I feel like Scott's been on. He's taught
Yeah.
the membership. Like, love Scott. Yeah, but this is. It just sounds so familiar. Like I was like laying in the hospital bed and texting my oral surgeon, and I was like, "She's got a tongue tie, and we're gonna. I like. We'll probably be home tomorrow." And he's like, "All right, when do you want to come in?" I was like,
But honestly, like now I know. I always thought like it seems like there's still a little bit there. Maybe I didn't do that. I don't know, but I always knew in the back of my head, like, she didn't have a full release for whatever reason. I'm pretty sure it's
mm,
because we didn't do body work before. And I was like, you know what? Like, I'm just gonna leave it alone because I can't. It'll give me anxiety if I start like thinking about what I need to do. And I was like, and if it unless it becomes an issue down the line,
yeah,
I'm not gonna do anything right now. And here we are.
one
Here
hundred
we are.
percent. But
But
the
it's like,
other
do I revise it at this point? She has
I feel like if
full.
you're going to do expansion, right? Like
Yeah.
at this point, I like to wait and see like what happens because
Yeah.
it's my opinion that if you release a tongue to a palate that needs expansion,
Mhm.
then the tongue heals to the palate that needs expansion. And in
Mhm.
some cases, not saying this is going to happen for every case, and it's totally like my theory
Yeah.
based on like working with patients, but if it's not like emergent and it's
Yeah.
kind of just like a hey, this might be adding to the symptoms, but like
Yeah.
it doesn't need to be done like right now.
Yeah.
I would rather like expand and then release the tongue so it can heal to the proper palate because
Yeah.
that
No, that
then I
makes
feel
sense.
like you're less likely going to need like another revision or you'll at least know that okay, the environment to which we released that tongue was like
Mhm.
the perfect environment or it
Yeah.
was like a healthy environment otherwise, right?
Makes sense.
So, I don't know. I'm always like path of least resistance
Mhm.
and I feel like especially because it sounded like you weren't sure if she even needed expansion. So initially, right, it was sort of like, oh, maybe, maybe not. Does she? And
Yeah.
I don't know if that was a different provider, but like at this point, I'm curious, like, is she high and narrow? Another person basically said she wasn't, or is she kind of
It's-
like borderline and needs a
She's a
little
little,
expansion?
I think she's kind of borderline, but she's on the smaller side. And, I asked Dr. Barry, the one thing that I really, really appreciate about Dr. Barry is he spent like a half hour on the phone with me one day. I was just like, "Are you sure we need to do this? What do you think?" And one of my questions was, enlarged adenoids and tonsils aside, structurally, does she need it? And he says, yeah, she does. And she has a little bit of a tooth rotation already, that I've always noticed. And again, it was one of those things that I kept, okay, like a mental note. That's she's gonna need expansion.
Yep.
um, but you know, this kid, she's also been in Mayo, also for 6 to 8 months, maybe, with Michelle Pareto. I don't know if you know
Mm-hmm.
her around here. Yeah.
Yep.
So we've got everybody on board. We've got
Yeah, you're doing all the things. That's the good news. Is like you've already got everything going. So at the end of the day, it's like something should just kind of fall into place, right? Like at some
yeah,
point, it should all just click.
yeah,
But
yeah,
it may be. I often see that expansion is part of that clicking process, if that makes
yeah.
sense. It's like we can make progress, but like to what extent when the
Right.
tongue doesn't fit in the palate, or we're noticing that like okay, they're borderline, but we're seeing some teeth turning a little bit, that tells us like okay, maybe there isn't actually enough room for all the adult teeth to like grow in,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
upright themselves properly. And it was fascinating too because with both my kids with expansion, that's when they started to lose teeth. Like they were late to get teeth, they were late to
Interesting.
lose teeth, and that tends to be
Yeah.
people say, "Oh, my kid's gonna like lose teeth late because they got teeth late." why did they get teeth late? What does their palate look like? And so that
That's
was,
really interesting.
and you'll like this too. So Lily had shark teeth, right? And so
Mhm.
she was in an ALF appliance. She got some expansion, but when her teeth started to grow in, she still needed like a little bit more expansion, especially on the bottom, which doesn't expand nearly as easily as the maxilla, right?
Mhm.
So she gets a second row of teeth, her little shark teeth, growing in behind her lower central incisors. And the dentist, who I do love him, but like he was like, it's fine. So those teeth will fall out. Like one's kind of like, oh, seeming like it might get a little wiggly. Like they weren't really wiggly. I think he was just trying to like, encourage her to like start wiggling it or something.
Yeah.
He's like, and then her tongue will push them forward. And I was like, oh no, we don't want that. Meanwhile, I go to the orthodontist next door that's connected to him, like literally a week later for a consult, thinking like, let's get her in some early expansion. And this
Yeah.
is not, and he did a beautiful airway assessment, but then the treatment plan did not match. And
Hmm.
he said all these like really concerning things. And actually to the point where I was so combative that I think they came and like got him at some point because they were like, you need to end this consult. And he called me at the end of his day to be like, are we good? Like, I just want to make sure we're like on this. I'm like, yeah, we're good. I got your number. uh, but
I had a second opinion who I went to and I had a similar.
oh my gosh. But this guy was like, oh, we should pull those teeth. And I was like, wait, your buddy across the hall, like that you guys like referred to each other, just said, give it 6 months and like, let's not pull those teeth. Like, let's see what happens. Sure enough, we didn't need to pull them.
Yeah.
I ended up going to another provider an hour away, drove a little further because this provider was like, let's put her into rapid palatal expansion and get things moving again. She's like, you have the most compliant kids. Like, why would we wait? And I was like, thank you. That's what I'm saying. Like, wait, like, let's help them breathe and not be sick all the time.
Yeah.
But yeah, as soon as that expansion started, boom, like out came those front two teeth. Up moved. She did
So
use
wild.
her tongue and push those teeth forward. So I have to say that's why I'm like, the dentist was not wrong. But also, if you see the kid's tongue is on the floor of the mouth, can we have a different conversation, please? All right. I love him though. He's great otherwise. No, but same thing happened with Mia, who is, 6 years old as of this past February. It wasn't until she had expansion that her teeth started to like wiggle and she started to lose teeth. And her expansion was done at the point of her first tooth coming out, which was like maybe like fourth quarter of last year or like fall of last year or so. I don't even remember, honestly. Maybe it was earlier this year. I don't know what month we're in anymore. But it was very, very interesting. And I was like, oh, it kind of makes sense because the teeth coming in, right? They have to resorb, I guess is the term, the root of that tooth. So it's almost like it eats the root of the tooth and like kills off that tooth. So it becomes wiggly and starts to fall out. So the new tooth can like take over its space, which is why we need baby teeth because these teeth are also bigger. So if they don't fit, everything starts to turn a little bit, right? And you get things growing in crooked and pushing baby teeth funky ways. And I will say, like, for the most part, their teeth are all coming in straight now because they've got room. And I'm like, all right, I'm
That's
bought
wild.
in. Yeah.
So did both of your girls have expansion on the bottom also?
Yes. So Lily had the ALF appliance upper and lower when she was 4 to 5. That was during COVID. And so we didn't do any body work. Everything was shut down. And honestly, like we probably would have stopped at around 9 months because she got like phase 1 of what we were looking to do was basically accomplish them. Because of COVID, we just kind of left it in, but then we took them out because we were moving. So when we moved down here, I was presenting her case and a colleague was like, hey, she needs a little more expansion and forward growth. And I was like, all right, like fine. Like, I think a lot of providers who use ALF will typically leave it in longer and follow the child's growth a bit more than what we did. But because we were moving and we felt like she got like really good growth and her tonsils shrunk down to nothing within 3 months, I was like, I'm good. I'm good with this for now. Like, we're good. You can take it out. So when we came down here, the provider down here put both girls, and Mia, she wanted to start on a myo brace first. But when she realized that Mia had croup 9 times in 1 year and had been on steroids nonstop, she was like, we're kind of in an emergent airway situation. Like, let's shift the treatment plan and we'll use myobrace on the back end to help continue to guide growth, but like, let's put her straight into the rapid paddle expander with a forward growth like component that was custom made for both of them. And then they both went into upper and lower. I don't think they went into them at the same time. I think we started with upper and then we may have like quickly followed with lower. At least for one of them, if not both. But because it was a lot of freaking appointments driving back and forth with 2 kids who are on 2 different schedules with uppers and lowers. And like, here's the fun part. We had to have spacers put in. So you literally go to, I'm like, can I do this myself? Like I have to drive an hour to have spacers put in for 30 seconds to drive back home, to come back 2 days later to then
Yeah.
have the appliance put in. I was like, you guys are killing me. But no, it was totally worth
You should have
it.
just moved.
I mean, here's
Again.
no joke, because they're in North Miami Beach. I in the beginning I was like, can I make my appointments on Fridays and I'll just get a hotel room and like we'll stay for the night?
Yes.
Yeah, no,
Good idea.
they're closed on Fridays. So I couldn't justify them missing 2 days of school for every single appointment to like, stay in my North Miami Beach, but it's all good.
So funny. Um, I mean, they say it's not hereditary and that has nothing to do with it, but like I 100% should have had expansion and I still probably need expansion. And my husband, I mean, same thing, just based on both of our
I
tooth
think it's
journeys.
epigenetics, like totally
Yeah.
epigenetics. I don't know why they say it's not
And like,
hereditary.
I feel
I
like
think it's both.
yeah, I mean, one of the people who I've spoken to, I was like, I think we need expansion. Like, nah. And I was like, well, like I had teeth issues, and my husband, I had braces for 7 years, and
Whoa.
it's don't
Whoa.
don't even,
I
I
don't think
got
I
them
knew that,
off
or
for
maybe I did,
prom. I
but
got them put back on.
that was me like before my bat mitzvah. I was like, take my braces off. I don't want them on in photos. Like I'm
Oh, I had
done.
them off for my bat mitzvah. Also, had them. I had them forever.
Yeah.
Um, but and my husband had teeth pulled, and he always says, I don't have enough room in my mouth. I'm like, oh, I think I think we all need expansion right now. If
Yeah.
we can get it covered by insurance.
Oh my gosh, there is a girl who I know from, like girl now mom, like who I know from like back home, like growing up, who lives down in South Florida. And she texted me the other day and she was like, do you have a recommendation for me and my child, or for my child? And I gave her the recommendation. She goes, oh, I'm actually going to that person for me. I didn't realize she did pediatrics. She's like,
Oh,
I had teeth pulled as a kid. And like, she's not in our space at all, right? Like, so
yes.
she's like, I had teeth pulled as a kid and I'm having like airway issues and I'm going to go for expansion and get like, like something put in place basically to fix I was like, I love this for you. It was like, this is the best text I could ever get all day.
Well, that's actually how I found Dr. Barry. Also, one of my really good friends, she actually posted a picture, I think, on Instagram that both of her kids had their tonsils and adenoids taken out, and we were just talking. She's like, we're working with this amazing doctor, and we just got to talking, and so, that's how I found. Oh my God, my alarm is beeping. Hold on, wait.
You're good.
We're gonna have to edit this out. Hold on. Like, of course it is.
All good.
Okay, I'm back.
You're back.
I'm gonna have to run in a few minutes
No,
also,
that's
but
okay. We can wrap up.
yeah. But I was talking to one of my friends who she's not a therapist, she's not in this world, but um she used to work on Broadway, and she's like, I've been working on my airway, and my endurance and when I exercise has been so much better, and when she sings, she has so much more breath support. And we were just talking, and she's the one who actually brought me to Dr. Barry. So
Amazing.
the word is getting out there.
Yes.
Word is getting out there.
Yes.
So
I love that.
um
Well, and when you were saying like the whole common, not normal thing, I was like thinking in my head, I've been seeing so many more like Instagram posts, right? Of like common, not normal, and
yeah,
people talking about this around the airway, myo, feeding, all kinds
yeah.
of issues related to these topics. And I'm like,
Can you make merch with that on
right? Common, not normal. Yeah, we should like
it?
have a shirt that says
I mean, same thing with like colic, right? And all the
colic
all
is
the
not a symptom. Put that
but
across
like,
the
when Gabby was a baby, my older one, she, obviously they told me she's colicky and there's no other
as if it was a
explanation.
diagnosis, right? Yep.
Yeah.
Hmm.
And I went back to the doctor who was like 85 years old. And I'm like, I just want you to know, this is what we're working with. And he's like, nah, like totally brushed me off. And, it's hard to almost like trust professionals, like medical professionals who've kind of been doing this for years. And, it's like the new research and the new way. It sometimes could work too.
Yeah. I mean, and thankfully there is research now that shows expansion, like so many millimeters of expansion does lead to a certain volume, like percentage and increased volume in the airway. Like
Yeah.
there's definite like numbers. And I think that was Audrey Yoon whose research demonstrates that. And so I'm like, more please, like all of this research coming out. I'm like, obviously we know it works. Like we see this
Yeah.
stuff work firsthand, but I'm like, it's very cool when there's published, like, even if they're case studies, but like just published documentation where we can say, hey, read this. Like it's
Yeah.
not just coming from my mouth. Like what
Yeah.
we're seeing is actually being validated and
Yeah.
published.
Totally.
So I know we're behind there in terms of publishing things, and I also am not one to like solely rely on the data because humans are not number data points, but that's
Yeah.
another conversation for another day. So,
I
anyways,
mean, even just, just the second that Gabby started nursing after her procedure with Dr. Siegel, I was like, oh, that's what that's supposed to feel like.
that was
I
Mia.
mean, within seconds.
Yeah. Yes, immediately. And our nursing journey was so much better, even though she was going to PT. And then we went to
Yeah.
see an osteo, and her neck was tight on one side a little, and
Mhm.
she was crawling with dragging a leg. And like we had other things we were
Mhm.
dealing with. Nursing was so much easier with her compared to Lily.
You want to hear one really cool thing? So, when I had brought Vivi as an infant to see Lee for the craniosacral, I had to bring Gabby with me, who at the time was 2, and she's like, running around Lee's office or whatever. And Lee takes a look at her, and I had known, again, one of those things that I was like, oh, I'm going to deal with it somehow. Gabby's foot used to turn inward, and Lee took one look at her and she goes, I can fix that. One appointment, she comes out, and she was 2, she's 7.5 now. It has never been like a thought on my mind ever since then. I mean, it was tension, and
Wow.
um, one one tiny release, and she fixed a whole issue. I mean, this stuff
Amazing.
works. This
It
stuff
does.
works.
I always say I can't explain it, but it works.
Hmm.
I've experienced it firsthand with myself, with my kids. Like it works.
Yeah.
It works. Just
Well, that when I say that, Lee yells at me. She's like, "No, there is an explanation." She's like, "No, I release the tension in the pattern of the body."
yeah.
I'm
No,
like,
and
okay.
that's right. I'm always like, talk to them, like talk to the people doing it
Yeah.
because they can explain it. I'm like, I can't explain it. I know there's a reason, right? But it is really cool to feel too, because like I've been able to feel like pulsating like in my body where it's like things feel like they're flowing better. Like it's almost like you can
Yeah.
feel the blood or the lymphatic fluids like actually like flowing differently. And apparently
Yeah.
only like 30% of people or so can actually feel this when you're getting certain
Huh.
types of body work. Per the guy who I used to go to in Maryland,
Yeah.
Manny Kim, but it was incredible. I would leave there feeling like a different human. And that's why
I
I used
was.
to say, like, I don't know how it works. I just know it does. But I know it, like, he would tell me, like, I'm like, please talk to me. Tell me everything you're doing and why what's happening is happening and how it's working. And he just explains things so beautifully, but I can't replicate his
Well,
brilliance.
Lee would ask me, she's like, there it is. Did you feel it? And I'm like, yeah. But I did walk out of there like a jellyfish. I was
Mhm.
like, I don't know what is
Yeah.
going on right now, but I feel like a complete, even with Vivi, when she did it the first time with her, I had like a newborn baby, and she was like this tense little ball, and she gave her back to me when she was finished. She was like a sack of potatoes, just like open and relaxed and calm. I mean, it's really wild. It's really
Yeah.
wild, and it really works. And I've sent probably like my entire caseload goes to her because you know I'm like, you will see a change. And the craziest is when they start talking after seeing Lee.
Mm,
She unlocks something in their brain.
that's wild.
It's real. It's so
So cool.
I think it is really cool to kind of see these other professions that are kind of like under the radar. And I feel like moms on Facebook always know. They know who to go to. You gotta find the name that comes up
True.
the most. And like when you really find that person who knows what they're doing, it's a game changer.
For sure. Well, I want you to come back at some point and update us on Vivi's case. Let us
Okay.
know how things are going after you've gone through a couple of these. I know this will be like a year from now, right? A couple of these like steps that you guys are going through right now. But thank you
Yeah, of
so much for sharing her with me. Tell us where everybody can find
course.
you.
So you can find me on Instagram. My handle is Let's Gab Speech. People always think my name is Gabby, but it's because of my daughter that I called it that. But it's Let's Gab Speech, and my website is letsgabspeech.com.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Becky.
Thank you, Hallie. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening to this podcast. If you found value in this episode and want to hear more of these MyoTots airway and feeding related episodes, be sure to leave a review on Apple Podcasts and share this episode on your social media platforms. You can access free resources and all I offer at halliebalkin.com or pop over to @HallieBalkin on Instagram to get all the latest updates.